Hi, students. I want to thank you so much for being so patient. I know so many of you have had questions and need assistance on your work, and I'm just very grateful for how patient you've been. I'm sure most of you know by now that I was diagnosed with COVID-19 a week ago. And then, as life would have it, to follow up the storm that happened on Thursday morning knocked our power out, and we just got our power back on. So, unfortunately, it was also messing with the towers near us. So, I had no service and could not get on the internet very easily. And so, I apologize for the cancellations of class and for not responding as quickly to emails as you guys are used to. Uh, me responding, but it has just been kind of a crazy week. With that being said, I am going to extend your deadlines. I know that I've already extended it to November 1st, but I'm actually going to go ahead and extend it to the middle of the week. So I'm going to extend that deadline for your outline to Wednesday, and let me take a look at what that date is. Wednesday, November 4th. So I'm hoping that gives you some extra time. And I am going to continue just using the weekly folder that we previously had for this week, for next week. And then the great news is I am doing much better. My quarantine ends on Wednesday, so I will be back in class on Thursday morning. So we will have a Zoom session on Tuesday morning during normal class time. And then hopefully I can answer any questions that you guys have and clarify some ideas. And then I want to go over some more stuff for the problem solution essay. And then on Thursday, I'll be back to face-to-face interaction. So again, thank you so much for your patience. Okay, so a couple questions that I've been getting made me really want to go back over this handout. And I'm not going to read all of it, but I just want to highlight some of these ideas. It says, after you choose your topic, you're going to begin planning for a problem solution essay. Why are problem solution essays pivotal to your education? Problem solution essays allow you to consider how you would approach a problem, convince your audience to care about that particular problem, propose a solution, and then prepare to dismantle any objections to your solution. That is exactly what you are going to accomplish in this essay in light of a social issue that is facing the United States of America. Below is a list of proposed topics. So one of the things, guys, that I think some of you are struggling, you're looking at these topics very broadly. Part of a great problem solution essay is really narrowing down a problem within a problem. So when we talk about COVID-19, for example, there are so many avenues that you could take for this particular problem. You could address access to education and how COVID-19 has caused this huge rift in public access to education, how some students are unable to have online access because they live in rural communities, or how when unfortunate events happen, like someone getting COVID-19 or power outages occur, how all of a sudden education kind of goes off the handle. You can talk about how a lot of people in their various jobs have been forced to provide their own protective gear and PPE equipment. You can talk about if you think that our economy is falling apart and you think that the state and the country needs to completely open back up, then you can talk about that. But what I want you to see is that it's not enough to write a sentence and a thesis statement and say COVID-19 is an issue. Of course it's an issue, but there are so many problems within COVID-19 that you need to pick a very specific avenue. On that same topic, talking about human trafficking, a lot of you are very interested in this topic. It's not enough to just talk about human trafficking. I would recommend that you choose a very specific population. the way that we handle human trafficking for children is going to look very different than how we handle human trafficking for a woman like the one that we saw in our YouTube video. They're going to need very different therapies. They're going to need very different government interference, because one is dealing with a child under the age of 18 and another is dealing with a child over the age of 18. So again, what I want you to see is if you go too broad on these topics, then you're setting yourself up for a disorganized paper. And that's basically what I say here. You must be clear about a specific issue within these larger issues when you're giving your thesis statement. And then just to cover a few of these ideas here, it does have to be in MLA format. You do have to have 6 secondary sources, 4 of which must be peer-reviewed. You do have to have 6 full pages. However, one thing I have decided to change, this can include your works cited, one of those pages. So if you have 5 full pages of essay, 1 page can count as your works cited. Now, if your works cited is 2 pages, you may not only type 4 full pages of essay. But I am going to allow for one of those. So essentially, as long as you have 5 full pages for your essay, that's going to be acceptable. And then a clear single problem with a unique proposed solution. I want to touch on the solution component. A lot of you have been asking, I don't know what to do for the solution. Guys, that's really where your research and everything we've learned in this semester really come into play. You can create a unique solution. I love seeing students have the opportunity to get creative and to do that. However, you can also take a solution that has already been proposed, say, for example, legislation. If there's a law that is already out there about human sex trafficking, but it is simply not enough, then you can take that law and you can expand on it and criticize it and say, you know, this is what we have available to us right now, but it is simply not enough. You even hear people in the TED Talk naturally do this. The mother of the daughter who was caught into the sex trafficking rings, she started talking about how many therapists that there were available for those girls that had been sex trafficked. And one of the things that she said was, there are just not enough. There are just simply not enough people to help. And so just know that it's completely available to you if that's something that you want to do and you want to expand on something that is already out there. And then the last thing, this should definitely be in third-person language. You're writing about a problem, you are crafting a solution, so everything should be in third person. Some of your thesis statements were already getting into the I believe, I think, I know, and we want to avoid that if at all possible. So now I am going to share, we are going to go to the outline. And I want to talk through some issues with this outline. One second, let me make sure. Here we go. Okay, so some of you have been asking questions over this, and I just want to clarify some of these ideas. So for the introduction, the attention getter, you guys, we've been over that since the beginning of the semester. Your hook, you want to create something that really gravitates your reader's interest. You want them to jump into your paper and to be eager to read it. Your introduction should give a little bit of background information. Obviously, with all of these big social issues, there's a lot of history involved. When and how did it start? Who was suffering? How many? Those are questions that I don't expect you to know exact numbers. When we are talking about the LGBTQ community, when we are talking about COVID-19, when we are talking about housing issues, those are major problems that we still don't know how many people have been impacted. But what I want you to see is that it's important to offer lots of background information. Part of the reason this is so important is without that background information, people don't really understand why it's a problem. You know, when we talk about systemic racism and we hear people that link it all the way back to slavery, we have such a deeper and more meaningful understanding of what that word really means. And then your thesis, it should clearly state the controlling idea of your paper, which is the problem, and then discuss possible solution or solutions. For some of you, it may be a two-part solution. I'm not sure what your particular topic or situation is, but that could definitely be a possibility. Your introduction for this problem solution essay is going to be longer than what you're typically used to dealing with your first research short essay. So don't be fearful of that. It is going to be lengthier with all of this information. And then the first part of your essay, you are solely addressing the problem. Your responsibility is to convince your reader it's a problem. If you are someone who's talking about how small businesses have suffered during COVID-19 and that we are coming into an era where small business is going to be kaput, to put it in America, then you need to really dive in and discuss, how did this happen? What was the timeline from March to today? You've really got to dive in and you've got to sell to your reader that it's a problem. The reality is some people don't believe that sex trafficking is an issue. Some people don't believe that systemic racism is a huge issue. So your problem paragraphs, those are meant for you to really dive in and show that this is a real issue. And I want you to consider this organization. Say that you are talking about COVID-19 and you are talking about access to education. Okay, that's the problem that you're talking about. When you are forming those paragraphs, guys, it's just like when we were doing our essay with the character qualities and we made those lists of character qualities. You need to make a list of all the different problems that go into access to education. Maybe one of those reasons are rural communities. They don't have these great internet towers that are super easy for people to get internet. It costs some people thousands of dollars to get internet in some places. Maybe it's that's when you start running into poverty issues. There's a lot of homes that don't have a computer. How do you guarantee those children are given education? Then on top of that, maybe another part of that issue is, we don't know what these students' home structure is like. If they don't have a mom and dad that are able to be there and help them with school, how can we be sure that they're actually getting the education they need? Guys, those are your various paragraphs. Those are your various problem paragraphs where you are proving that these things are problems, and the way that you make sure that your reader sees each unique part of the problem is through your topic sentence. So as you're brainstorming, as you're coming up with those lists within your problem areas, you need to realize that those ideas that are contributing to the problem, those are each examples of paragraphs, and you utilize topic sentences to introduce each part of that problem. So we're going to discuss the contribute and significant causes. That's exactly what I was just talking about there. Your research should provide data, which may include case histories, examples, statistic evidence, and authoritative questions. Who is causing the suffering? Why? Who is benefiting from the situation? Guys, your answer for that may be nobody, and that's okay. What national or international problems contribute to this? Who is contributing indirectly to the problems by not taking steps to stop it? And then the only genuine restriction is the materials presented in the body must provide clear and relevant support for your thesis. Basically, all of your problem paragraphs should go back to proving that your thesis is a problem. And then underneath this section, causes of the problem, I want you to just cite the various sources that you plan to use. I want to see that you have really constructed some good research. And then when we go down to effects of the problem, why, how did these become problems? What are the complications that come from this? Laws, regulation, government programs that directly impact this issue, discussion that the effects have on society, on people. A lot of people are saying that this generation of middle school and high school kids are really going to be about 2 years behind academically when this is all said and done. Those are long-term ideas that we're talking about. So again, these are all your problem paragraphs. You do not necessarily have to divide your paper into causes of the problem and effects of the problem. That's not necessary, but if it helps you stay better organized, that is fine too. And then solutions. And this section should be a little bit longer than your problem section. What logical solutions have been proposed in the past? Guys, maybe the answer is nothing. Maybe you are addressing a problem. If you are doing COVID-19, there's a good chance that whatever problem that you're addressing, that there's not a real solution for it yet. And that's okay. That's okay to say. What are the solutions proposed for the future? And then it would be acceptable for you to make assumptions and offer an opinion or recommend the action or addition to those offered by authoritative sources. You may analyze, evaluate, and explain the most favorable course of action. And then, of course, your conclusion. What can you draw from your research? Okay, what, with all of your reading, with all that you've come to understand about this problem, what do you draw together? And then again, of course, you have to reinforce your thesis statement. And then you need some kind of conclusion, just a conclusive sentence of, based off of your reasoning and deductions, your research, based off of what you have come to find in your thesis, what is the answer here? And then it's super appropriate in a problem solution essay to have a call to action, okay? What do you want your reader to do? After they read this essay and they understand this problem better, what do you want from them? What do you expect them to go and do with this information? And again, underneath both the problem and the solution components, I don't expect you to do it underneath the effects because it might be the same sources as the problem, and that's fine. I want you to list out your sources. What sources do you plan to use? And then the final thing that I want to share with you is a student example from my last, it was in the spring, my spring semester. This was a student that wrote about the opioid epidemic. And I want to just show you the breakdown of what he did in his paper. I've never met a pregnant woman who didn't want to get clean. They all want to get off drugs to do the best they can for their baby, but this addiction has a hold on them, said the maternal fetal medicine specialist at Missoula's Community Medical Center. In 1991, an increased amount of opioid prescriptions for pain led to the initial wave of opioid-related deaths. This increase of prescriptions was the result of the pharmaceutical industry's premature and predatory assurance of these drugs' safety. And by 1999, 86% of these drug users used them for non-cancer pain. The original claims of opioids' low rates of addiction quickly began to dissolve when the science community used 38 separate studies to conclude that these drugs actually had an addiction rate of 8 to 12%. This realization was far too late. The opioid epidemic had already begun. Children suffering from exposures to these drugs experience poor fetal growth and or preterm labor. Seizures, dehydration, respiratory problems, jaundice, sepsis, eating difficulties, tremors, and excessive irritability are also just some of the common symptoms of victims suffering from this influence. Knowing the alarming and physical and psychological damage that neonatal opioid addiction causes to newborns and their mothers, Americans should aid in the awareness and prevention of this issue by pursuing stricter laws on opioid prescriptions and assisting the affected mothers to seek rehabilitation. Guys, what I want you to see from this introduction, we know he is talking about opioid addiction, right? He's talking about opioid addiction and prescriptions and how they can cause addiction. But he's not just talking about addiction. He is specifically targeting mothers who are addicted to prescription opioids. He is specifically addressing the effects of that, which are the various ailments that are caused within children, whether it's jaundice, sepsis, eating difficulties, seizures. We see that he is not just talking about opioid addiction, he is gearing a specific population of people. That is what I want you to really focus on this week. I really want you to narrow down this idea of what population am I going to dive into. And then I just want to take a look at a couple of his paragraphs. Misleading, predatory prescriptions, and an inept government response are the main culprits of this devastating epidemic. So his topic sentence, the very first thing that he's saying is that the prescriptions were misleading and the government did not respond to that. And he talks about the CDC and how 1 in 3 women were given and filled an opioid prescription between 2008 and 2012. And he goes through and describes how this was being done. And you can see there's research all in the midst of this that he uses. And then let's look at his summative sentence. It is transparent that overprescription and ineffective government action has worsened this epidemic. This tragedy has had many repercussions. What this student did is he did a problem and he did an effects paragraph. Then he starts showing the effects of this. 86% of non-cancer pain users were expected mothers. And he is going on to prove that, yes, this had detrimental effects on the maternal community. 100 babies a day were born with NAS, which is 32,000 babies a year. Again, we see these beautiful ways that he used research to support his ideas. There is rarely an issue such as this one that has such comparable short and long-term consequences. So we see that this first paragraph he constructed was a problem. Then he constructed an effects. What were the effects of those problems? This research concludes that there are several ways that Americans could effectively stifle the growth and damage of the opioid epidemic. What we clearly see there is that he is going into the solution component. He starts talking about the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, and he goes through various ad campaigns. And then he has his conclusion. NAS is a serious issue that is devastating to the future of millions of those that are affected. The economic, psychological, and physical damage caused by this ravaging disease costs far more than what American people can tolerate. The best course of action to take during this time is to ensure that doctors are only giving the bare minimum of opioids to their patients, and those issuing these drugs should be required to educate the recipients of the possible dangers. The mental devastation that is this syndrome can cause to its victims can be somewhat diminished by the involvement of the mothers in the child's early life. This being said, Americans need to push their representatives to pursue legislation which was his solution that increases support for the mothers that suffer from this condition in order to reduce the massive effects that this crisis has caused on our society. And then we see he has his works cited page. When I attach this lecture, I'm also going to attach this student example for you to look over. And I'm going to ask a few questions on Tuesday and Monday for my two 112 classes. So I want you to really read through this example before Zoom class on Monday and Tuesday so that we can talk about this in a little more depth. I hope this was helpful. Again, your new deadline is Wednesday, okay? Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. And that date is going to be November the 4th. Please reach out if you have any questions now that my internet is back up and running and I'm doing so much better than I was a week ago. I will hopefully be quicker to respond. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Halloween, and I will see you in class on Monday and Tuesday via Zoom.